23 days until the sun shines again. 23 days until the return of happiness. 23 days until the return of football. That's right, folks. UFL 2026 kicks off in just 23 days, and we get football on our TVs again. We've already started the UFL Team Preview series. We did the defending champion DC Defenders, and now it's time for your 2026 Dallas Renegades Team Preview. Welcome, football fans, to another edition of the D-Gen Docs. Of course, a UFL, a United Football edition of the show. That is right, folks. We are less than a month out. We know the Super Bowl is over, but you don't want to wait 6, 7, 8 months until football. There is real professional football coming to a city near you. I hope you're just as jacked up as I am, folks. What's up? I'm your host, the D-Gen Doc, and this is the D-Gen Docs, and today it's all about the UFL. That is right. We are talking specifically the Dallas Renegades. Season is not too far away, so this week started the UFL Team Preview series. There's 8 teams. We're going through it. Look, if you are unfamiliar, 8 teams, 1 league. We got 3 new teams. We got 2 rebrands. We got 3 teams staying the same. We got a bunch of stuff going on. But hey, so I did a season preview, just kind of everything you need to know with all the changes episode a couple weeks ago. Rules 2026 playing rules came out. I did an episode on that, I think, last week. And then, like I mentioned, DC Defenders was the first one we kicked off. Had to pay homage to the defending champions. Now we're rolling through the rest of these teams. We got the Dallas Renegades. All about the Renegades today, from coaching staff to stadium to key players, roster breakdown, and finally, outlook. What do I think this team's going to look like for the 2026 football season? All right, folks, let's go ahead and kick it off with these Dallas Renegades here. You may be thinking, the logo looks pretty familiar to the Arlington Renegades. And you would be right. So this is one of the teams that there were 2 teams that rebranded or essentially relocated, right? So they were the Arlington Renegades. Now they moved down the road there to Dallas. Quite frankly, the turnout in Arlington was not great. There was just not a lot of people showing up to the stadium. So the new ownership, Mike Rapoli there, really wants to try to drive fan engagement. Fans is what's going to keep this league alive. It's what makes college football amazing. It's what makes the NFL amazing. Obviously it's the great players on the field, but the fans, the home environment, that is really what sells a league and makes it fun. So we are now in Dallas. They are the Dallas Renegades. They used to play in Choctaw Stadium there in Arlington. They will now be moving to Toyota Stadium in Frisco, Texas, which is the home of the MLS team there. The Dallas, I can't even begin to know. Soccer, wrong kind of football, not my thing. But that's a Dallas MLS team. They play their soccer games there. So another big switch, you're going to kind of realize some themes going to the smaller soccer stadiums. We just did the DC Defenders. They've been playing at Audi Field, home of the Beer Snake. It makes for one of the probably second to St. Louis, the second best home field advantage. So smaller stadiums, because let's be honest, right now this is not the NFL. It's not college football. We're not going to pack 60, 40,000 seat stadiums there. So let's go ahead and get more intimate stadiums and really kind of create that home field advantage. That is the new way of the UFL. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what this team was like in 2025, and then we'll go ahead and move forward to the 2026. So let's look back to learn a little bit to then move forward here. So look, first things first, we need to talk about Bob Stoops, legend of the game, Oklahoma coach for a long time. Then he came over to the Renegades. He led this Arlington Renegades to a 2023 XFL championship before the two teams merged there. So he is a legend of the game, not only spring football, ball football at all levels. So he retired this offseason. So he was the man of the ship from the last 4 seasons, if I believe, 4 or 3 seasons with the Renegades there. And last year, as my cat enters the picture because she can't get enough of UFL football, look, this team was 5-5. They missed the playoffs as those Arlington Renegades, just barely. Man, this was a team last year. If you look at it, we'll get into it with the stats, and the stats kind of reflect this. Really felt like they underperformed. There was a lot of talent on the roster. You have the Spring King, which we will get to here as we get into this further into this breakdown. You had the Sal Canellas. You had talent on offense, talent on defense. You have a legendary coach. Just couldn't put it all together. Had some problems with some turnovers, which we'll talk about. But this was a team that always, the last couple years, obviously 2023, they won the whole damn thing. It was the XFL, but they won that league, won that championship at a nice juicy price. Gave that out a couple of years ago. It's probably the first really nice cash of spring football for me. And ever since then, they've just kind of really been a frustrating team because it's a team that I would typically like on paper, but they just struggle to put it together. And 2024 wasn't a great season. And then last year, again, 5-5, missed the playoffs, good enough to be in games and compete, but just not quite getting the victories that they need. Looking at the stats here for the 2025 season, this was a team that they were number 4 in yardage for total offense. They were the number 4 scoring offense, 22.9 points per game. They were the number 2 passing offense and the number 6 rushing offense. So we'll talk more about this when we get into roster breakdown, but this was a team that, Luis Perez in particular, he's the second leading passer in the league. Makes sense. They're the second passing offense, right? He started all the games. They could get it done through the air, but their running game was just very lackluster. And when this Renegade team and Perez was at their best in that 2023 season, the play action is really a piece that he can use very well. He's a very accurate quarterback. He needs time because he's a bit immobile. I'm getting a little ahead of myself with the quarterback breakdown, but this was a team that they just could not find a running game last year. That looked a little bit good early on, but they just struggled to find consistency. Their offensive line, frankly, was just not up to snuff, and that really kind of wrecked a lot on the offense. Defense, number 1 defense in the league in terms of yards allowed per game. But they were the number 3 defense, still top half of the league, but number 3, giving up 16.8 points per game. We'll talk about turnovers here in a second. Turnovers definitely had something to do with the whole, hey, we're giving up the least amount of yards, but we're still giving up a third least amount of points, 3rd in scoring defense. Number 2 in rush defense, number 3 in pass defense. So really, they were a pretty balanced defense. Again, we'll talk about why in the scoring, they had a 0 turnover margin on the year in the 10-game regular season because they had 16 giveaways and 16 takeaways. So the offense with turnovers kind of put them in some bad spots. Luis Perez threw quite a bit of interceptions, and he had 3 lost fumbles on the year. Defense, again, it's just they were such a frustrating team because, and we see it in the stats. On paper, number 2 passing offense, the number 1 yardage allowed defense. Got good pieces, but because of the turnovers and just really kind of on those clutch situations, 3rd down, red zones, just not executing when they needed to, and that led to a very mediocre 5-5 season. Now we're looking forward, 2026, what this episode is all about here. We'll start with, this is a betting show, so I know these are just team previews at this point, but we're going to start with the 2026 championship odds to win it all. Now, remember, only 8 teams. There used to be divisions. There used to be an XFL division and a USFL division, just the teams that came from those separate leagues, and it would be the top 2 in each. So, based on how that would look, even if there was 3 really good teams in the, USFL, then only 2 of those teams make it no matter what. Now they've changed it. So it's just the top 4 teams in the league. So there's no more conferences. So it is purely just 4 best records, move on. Then you kind of seed it from there. 1 seed plays the 4 seed, 2 and 3, and then they play the championship, right? So that is the playoff format, and that is a change. So it is of note. No more we used to be able to take advantage of conferences. And if you had a bunch of shitty teams in the one conference and they had a bunch of high odds, I mean, two of those teams are making the playoffs. So it was kind of like nicer to take some of those long shots in that aspect. But even with it's only 8 teams in the league, there's been a lot of turnover. You'll see when I do my season finale kind of preview before the season kickoff, long shots still pay in this league. All right, so for the Dallas Renegades 2026 championship odds, DraftKings, you've got plus 475, Score Bet, old ESPN Bet, plus 550, and Bet 365, plus 475. They're the third favorite typically on most of the books, maybe the fourth, but they're definitely on the upper echelon there. And part of the reason is because they replaced one veteran coach with another veteran coach, a guy who is no stranger to the game of football, and that is new head coach Rick Neuheisel. He is now the Dallas Renegades head coach, replacing Bob Stoops here. Tell you a little about Mr. Neuhaus here, Coach Neuheisel. I'd say if you're definitely a little bit maybe older, a little bit having of wisdom, as we would say, you probably definitely know him. He's been out of coaching since 2011, but he has had an illustrious coaching career. He also was a player. He was a quarterback at UCLA. In senior year, he won the starting job for the Bruins there, and he led them to a victory. He's the only player to lead UCLA to a win, just win the Rose Bowl, not just UCLA specifically, but he's the only player to win the Rose Bowl as both a player and a head coach, which is a pretty damn cool stat. But yeah, he was a quarterback at UCLA. His senior year, he got to start and was able to beat Washington there. Then from a coaching, so he played at UCLA senior year. Then he actually played for the San Antonio Gunslingers in the 1980s in the OG USFL, United States Football League there. So he played 2 seasons of spring football. So it's kind of a full circle moment for Coach Neuheisel there. He did have a brief stint in the NFL with a couple teams, but never really panned out. So he moved to coaching. He was bouncing around. He was Baltimore Ravens OC for a few years, but he was a college head coach for the Colorado Buffaloes, the Washington Huskies, and then those UCLA Bruins, where he, again, won a Rose Bowl with them as a coach and was the only guy to do it as a player and a coach, which is a really cool. He got into TV broadcasting in 2011, college football specifically. He did have a short stint as the Arizona Hotshots head coach for the Alliance American Football League, the AAF, back in 2019 before COVID shut that league down. So he's kind of been itching to get back into coaching. It's been a while. I mean, again, 2011, he got into broadcasting. Brief stint in Arizona with the Hotshots before that spring football league got shut down. So it's been, 10-ish years, 10, 15 years. I know he had that brief stint in 2019, but it's been a while since he's been a consistent head coach. But he does have a ton of experience there. And he brings along with him a fairly experienced coaching staff as well. Offensive coordinator, Noel Mazzoni. He was the Memphis Showboats, Pittsburgh Maulers, New Orleans Breakers offensive coordinator the past 4 years. He's got a lot of college exposure experience just on a staff, but he's been the offensive coordinator for the past 4 years for a spring football team. So he's familiar with spring football. He's on the Showboats. Showboats, not the best team, but they really were devoid of talent, especially at the offensive line. It's kind of tough for them to do a lot for the OC, so I'm not going to knock Mazzone there, but he has at least, the New Orleans Breakers offense, I will say, that's an offense that could fly back in the old USFL. The Pittsburgh Maulers, more of a defensive team. Showboats, more defense-led, so kind of up in the air, but at least he's familiar with spring football. And then defensive coordinator Mike Gilhammer. He's got 15 years of NFL coaching, but it's, from what I could tell research-wise, it's his first time as a defensive coordinator. So a lot of experience, older coaching staff, a lot of experience. OC's been doing it for the past couple of years, but head coach Neuheisel there hasn't been coaching for a while. Not to say it's not like riding a bike, but he's been out of the game for a little bit. And, Gilheimer is his first time as a defensive coordinator here. So going to be interesting to see how the players react to that. Now we're moving on to everybody's favorite part. I try to combine favorite part and favorite part, essentially, and got fart. So sorry about that. But everybody's favorite part, the quarterback room. Yes, the quarterback room. And if we're going to talk about quarterbacks with the Dallas Renegades, got to make sure I'm going to do my best to not call them the Arlington Renegades this whole episode. But the Dallas Renegades, you got to start with the Spring King himself. He is nicknamed the Spring King, Mr. Luis Perez, because the quarterback who taught himself how to play through YouTube, but he is now in his 5th year of spring football and his 4th season with the Renegades. He's played in the AAF. He's played in the US or the XFL. He's played in the UFL, played in the TSL. He's played in he's the only quarterback I think to throw a touchdown in four spring leagues or whatever it may be. So he is appropriately named the Spring King. Now, he started 10 games last year, 71.6% completion percentage, which you're going to see from him. We talked Jordan Ta'amu last week. Jordan Ta'amu is more around a 55, 50, 60 guy. Perez is much more accurate, but much more kind of precision, shorter passing there. He was number 1 in passing yards. He threw a ton, but almost 2,300 pass yards, 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 3 lost fumbles, which is of note because he's not the most mobile guy. So he was first in the league in passing yards, second in touchdown, but he was also number 1 in interceptions. He did have a tendency to turn the ball over. Luis Perez is a guy we kind of know what we're going to get from him. He's an accurate quarterback. He's not very mobile, so he needs protection from that offensive line. Also, that's why running game is very important because he can utilize play action, create a little bit more time back there. But if the Renegades are not a threat to run the ball, he can take a lot of sacks. Those where the fumble comes. That's where the interceptions can come. That's where we can get into trouble with this team. So 2023, they had a better offensive line, could run the ball a little bit more better, could use play action. Things were going well. Last couple of years, not been the case. Not been quite the effective quarterback that we've come to know. Rest of the room, Austin Reed. If you're a college football fan, you probably recognize that name, at least from the Group of 5. Western Kentucky quarterback there, the Hilltoppers. He bounced around from some smaller schools before, but he more famously went to Western Kentucky, put up a ton of yards and touchdowns like most guys do there. And that's where he kind of became popular. And then someone you probably aren't as familiar with, Luke Lennon. He was a former D3 North Central quarterback. Now, he was well decorated. He won 2 national championships there and was a starter for 2 years and put up buco crazy numbers. But it was in the D3 ranks. Coach Neuheisel has said that other guys are going to get opportunities, but I would imagine it's pretty far-fetched to think that it's not going to be Luis Perez's year again. He came back this season. I would imagine he at least starts at QB1. Hayes, who I'm projecting is going to be quarterback 1. We'll see how the season goes if they do truly give some guys. I typically don't love when coaches rotate quarterbacks like series. It kind of worked for the Birmingham Stallions with, Jamar Smith and back when they had, the guy, his name is evading me right now, but he went to play for the Packers for a little bit after Alex Magoo there. And then you have Adrian Martinez and Matt Corral. They could kind of make it work. Honestly, they were more talented and better coached than much of the other leagues. But a lot of these other quarterback or teams that try to do this 2-quarterback system doesn't typically go well. Just ask the Houston Gamblers who have been trying to do it, or the Houston Roughnecks, whatever they were at the time. Does not typically go well. So I do expect Luis Perez to win the job and be the QB1 there. Okay, so we're going to go through roster breakdown. We're going to talk about key players on this roster. We're going to talk about key losses, and then we're going to finish up with an outlook, how I expect this team to look in 2026. Kind of talked about it, but go ahead and kind of tie a nice bow on it at the end. Go ahead and hydrate here. Typically used to doing shows with a co-host all year. So flying solo, still fun, but get a lot more parched, having to take a lot more hydration breaks. So Luis Perez, key player, obviously, QB1, second leading passer in the league. Already spent some time on him, but obviously going to be a key player for this team. First offensive lineman I'm going to highlight here. Offensive guard Abdul Beecham, one of the better UFL offensive linemen. He was on the Seattle Battlehawks at least last season, if not the season before. Seattle Sea Dragons. That'd be awesome if they come back. St. Louis Battlehawks there. They, if you watched the last season, they were one of the better teams running the ball. They were really running over everybody with Jacob Sailors and Manny Wilkins. They were kind of a two-headed monster there. And that offensive line was a awesome unit. One of the best, if not the best. Abdel Beecham got hurt during the year, and that offensive line really tanked once he went down. It was just not the same. So this is a guy, he's an offensive guard, but he is a force in the middle, so much so that I want to highlight him. He's on this team this year, and I think he's really going to make an impact. Running back Day Hunter returns. He was the RB1 last year, put up 453 yards and 2 touchdowns. He will be back as their RB1. Wide receiver 1 is also back in Tyler Vaughns. He was one of the better wide receivers in the UFL in spring football. He's a really good chemistry with Luis Perez, 475 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. Wide receiver 2, Deontay Burnett, also returns, 350 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. So you're getting almost 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns of production back in the wide receiver room. The other guy I want to talk about here, I'm going to talk about the kicker on every team. You got the new 4-point field goals. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out the rules episode. But field goals over 60 yards are 4 points instead of 3. Now, you got to have a guy who's going to have a leg to get there. So Colton Thieker looks like he's going to be the kicker. They have 2 kickers listed, but the other guy, he hasn't kicked field goals in years, and he's mostly a punter. So I'm going to assume he's going to be the punter. And Thieker, over from Cal Poly, is going to be the kicker. He transferred to Wazoo after Cal Poly, but he doesn't have any recorded stats that I could find. So last time he kicked was in 2020, at least from where the research I could find at the collegiate level. And Cal Poly, he was 10 for 16 in his college career, only 62.5% with a long of 52 yards. He was 41 for 41, a perfect 100% on extra points. But as a field goal kicker, at least, we're talking 6 years ago, 62%, not great. Long of 52, seems like he's not someone who's really going to be attempting these long 60-yarders. Now, it's been 6 years. Who's to know he hasn't been what he's been doing to train and get better, but this is the last stats that we have. So right now, not projecting that to be a super strong point. Obviously, the 41 out of 41 extra points tells me, hey, if it's something close range, it looks like this guy's going to be nails and pretty dead on. But as we start getting back, that's where things can get a little bit dicey. To note, that is college extra points. College extra points, obviously from the inside the 5-yard line, nothing big at all. To get a 1 point in the UFL, it's just like the NFL. It's going to be a 33-yarder. So a little bit of difference there. It may not be quite as automatic. All right, going over to the defensive side, highlighting some guys over there. Nice part about this, you're getting some return production. Again, this defense was number 1 statistically from a yardage standpoint. They allowed the least amount of yards in the league overall on defense. You got cornerback number 1, Ajane Harris. He led the team with 3 interceptions and was second with 12 pass breakups. He was also the second leading tackler, which you don't love to see as a DB. It's good that he sticks his nose in there, but you obviously want your linebackers cleaning that up before it gets to the second level or third level, really, at that point. They're also bringing back their star linebacker, Donald Payne. He had 66 tackles and was the leading tackler by far, by 20 tackles on the team. So he's coming back. And then their best pass rusher, Willie Taylor, who had 7 sacks last season, will be back as well. Of note, they added defensive end Tashawn Bauer from the Houston Roughnecks, now the Houston Gamblers. He was the leading sacker for that team. He only had 4, but he only played in 6 games. He also had 7 TFLs in 6 games. So he got injured and wasn't able to finish the season. But in those first 6 games, and really call it 5.5 because he got injured in the 6th, he was on a tear. He was a menace in the backfield. So you pair him up with Willie Taylor. This is, on paper, a very talented defense. Again, it kind of went under the radar because everyone talks about their offense and Luis Perez and things like that. But number 1 in yardage allowed last season. All right, getting to the losses, the key losses for this team. We are going to start. So I like to start it with the percentage of players that arrived to training camp as of a couple weeks ago that they drafted, because in the UFL, you can get drafted by a team, but if a better opportunity comes, whether it be the NFL, whether it be coaching, whether it be retiring, whatever it may be, not everyone's reporting to camp. So 89% of players that they drafted as of a week ago were reporting to camp. So that is a pretty high number. That's near the tops. I think the lowest was the DC Defenders at around 73%. So some guys they're losing from last season. One of them can't be overstated, Sal Cannella. If you've watched the Renegade over the years, him and Luis Perez have been some of the staples of this team. It's the tight end with the flow. A lot of us UFL fans were clamoring for him to get an NFL shot. He finally got one with the Cleveland Browns. Once David Njoku went down, got a little bit of some reps. Hopefully, works his way into some more reps this season. But he is someone who definitely, he's got great hands. He was second on the team in receiving yards by 1 yard. He had 474 yards. Vaughn's had 475, and he had one touchdown in the year. He is one of, if not the favorite target for Luis Perez over the past couple of years. This is a big loss. They're going to have to figure this out, especially because their tight end room behind him, there's not anyone that's really jumping off the page from a production standpoint, or that they, that well known or anything like that. Not to say somebody can't step up and, fill that role, but that is some big, big cleats to fill there for Sal Cannella. They're running back to Kellen Balaj, who got hurt last year. He looked extremely explosive last season. He is no longer, he moved on to another team, but I think I saw he got cut or removed for an injury or something like that. But he is not going to be with the Renegades this year. He had 328 rush yards and 2 touchdowns. He was kind of that nice 1-2 punch with Day Hunter there. And then Hunter took over the backfield after Balaj's injury. Also, defensive tackle Chris Odom. He was 30 tackles, 5 sacks, which are second on the team. He is not going to be on the team as well. But I will say Tashawn Bauer, although it would have been great to pair those guys up in the interior defensive line, Bauer coming in kind of helps lessen that blow. Overall, I mean, hey, Cannella and Odom are some big losses, but compared to some other teams, not crazy losses. A lot of this team's core is going to remain the same. Now, I'm going to talk about, all right, what are some of the question marks and then the outlook for this team in the 2026 season. One of the big takeaways, this O-line group is projected to be a very solid group. Now, if you've known me in talking football over the past couple of years, offensive line matters. I'm always going to say that. As Nova agrees, offensive line matters. You can't do anything without the hog mollies up front. And especially in spring football, there is a lot of, let's call it, variability across the league at times. Now, this O-line group projects to be pretty solid. You got first-round pick, offensive tackle from Michigan Panthers, Chim Okafor. You've got interior offensive lineman Jake Burton, who they just picked up, who was a former Michigan Panther. Michigan Panthers and St. Louis Battlehawks were kind of 1A, 1B with offensive line last season. Abdul Beecham, who we've already talked about, coming over from the St. Louis Battlehawks. And then Keaton Sutherland, who played with the Birmingham Stallions for the past couple of seasons, who typically run a pretty stout offensive line. Those are all 4 guys who have been pretty damn good starters in the UFL in spring football. So, 4 out of your 5 are all very familiar with the game and have all produced at a high level in this league. So I'm pretty damn optimistic on the offensive line here. One of the biggest question marks, and then I kind of talked about it just recently, life without Perez's favorite target in Sal Cannella. Tyler Vaughn's is good. Burnett is good. They've got, some guys that can potentially do some things on the outside, but that tight end position was such a key component of the offense and of Luis Perez's kind of repertoire and that chemistry there. I am curious how this is going to look. He is a guy that likes to utilize the tight end, and right now I'm not seeing anyone on the roster that's going to be able to fill in that role. So that is a major question mark for me. The other one is, look, the defense has talent, but can the first-time defensive coordinator get them in the right positions? They're bringing back a lot of production, but that does not always equate to the same amount of success depending on the scheme and how things are run. This is a whole coaching haul, right? New head coach, new OC, new defensive coordinator. Not to say, Newhousel can't come in and Gilheimer can't come in and establish a system, but been out of coaching for a little while. First-time defensive coordinator. I have a little bit of question marks. Although the talent is there, we've seen it plenty of times where, hey, this roster is pretty damn talented. Why are they not producing at the level that we would expect here? And coaching matters, especially in this type of league. Coaching matters. My overall outlook on this team, I think that this team is very talented, and maybe it's because I'm a little bit trigger happy because of the way that they've burned me in the past couple seasons. as far as, man, this team looks good on paper, but just not producing to the level at their potential the past couple seasons. But I do think they're going to be a middle of the pack team. I think they'll be defined by their ability to run the ball and their defense. Ability to run the ball, look, we know what we're going to get with Luis Perez. He's an accurate quarterback with mobility deficits. If he doesn't have a good offensive line, which I think he will, if he doesn't have time, he can struggle. And if he doesn't have a running game where he can run play action off of, he can also struggle and get into some turnovers and things like that. If the defenses can just pin their ears back, even with the solid offensive line, it's tough for him to be able to operate. Just, he's a guy who's throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game, and it does not typically turn out well. When they're at their best, they're able to run the ball, play behind their defense there, and Perez can work the play action game. I still have my concerns a little bit in the running back situation. Day Hunter did fairly well, but the running game has just been so inconsistent for them. And then really it's the defense with the first-time defensive coordinator. That's where a lot of the questions come in. They are a talented enough team to win the league. However, at that price, obviously at ScoreBet plus 550, if you believe in them, that's the best price you can get out there right now. But under 5-1 there, I don't think that I'm not giving them the third best odds in my projections to win the league is basically what I'm saying. Would I be surprised if they make the playoffs? Absolutely not. However, I don't view them right now as a championship contender. I think, Luis Perez, I think if you look at the quarterbacks and the guys who have had the most success in these leagues, typically you want some mobility aspect to your quarterback. Bryce Perkins, Jordan Teamu, Adrian Martinez, guys like that, Alex Magoo, Jamar Smith, right? I know Perez won it in 2023 in the XFL, but I really thought that they were able to establish the run there. And you had Canella, and you had a really solid defense, and you limited the turnovers. The turnovers last year, what we saw from Perez, I don't think was a great sign. He's just getting a year older. It's not like he's getting any more spry and young. So, think they definitely would not be exposed. They make the playoffs, expect them to contend for that. However, I am not laying a little bit of the chalk there. I think that's too short of a price as a championship contender. That is my outlook for the Dallas Renegades on the 2026 season. So what's next? Well, we've done DC Defenders. We've done the Arlington Renegades. Next up will be the St. Louis Battlehawks. So look forward to that episode to drop in the next couple of days here. And then we're just going to keep rolling from there. Going to get through the 8-team previews. And then I'm going to do one season preview from a betting perspective. All right, who am I actually putting my money on? Let's look at the league from kind of a top-down view. And then it's all of a sudden we'll be in week 1. And what this show is going to be, what it's been the past couple of years, is a weekly betting show where I will break down all 4 of the matchups. And then I will give out my picks, over-under, spread picks on the spread, money lines, things like that. If we get props this year, usually I'll tweet those out because they don't come out. The lines don't come out until later. But every year we've gotten more and more betting markets with the UFL. So I would love to be able to get the props early enough, maybe Wednesday or Thursday, just kind of see how it happens this year. But if I can get the props by, let's say, Thursday, I'll switch and do the shows on Thursday and kind of do it from there. So we'll kind of play it by ear. But traditionally, last season at least, they didn't drop the props until like Friday. So at that point, there's a game on Friday, so I can't really record. I don't want to wait until that long. So we'll see. I'm hoping I can do both props and spreads and things like that. But at the bare minimum, you're going to get the game breakdowns. I will talk about guys that I like, don't like there. And then also we're going to go ahead and do, over-unders, best bets, and things like that. So we're going to have another fun, profitable year. But we're getting through these team previews first. There's a lot of change in the UFL this season, which I think is a lot for the better. But we got to know what these teams are going to look like, especially if we're going to put our hard-earned money on the table. All right, folks, you know what they say. A lock a day keeps the bookie away. And here at the DJ Docs, we've got your prescription. From Doc here on DFSG Plus, I am out of here.